Everybody, Data Day Wednesday, and today, I got to tell you, Dean, when you brought up what the show was going to be about today, in my years in this industry, never would have I heard of it, or would I have even thought about what we're going to talk about today.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
Morning, Lisa. Good morning, Richard.
Now, that was a great teaser for anybody who caught that before that, because I'm even wondering, what is he talking about? So,
yeah,
dude, it's crazy what we're going to talk about today. Some data Dean's brought to the table, but in essence, what it is officially trucking is cheaper than rail. And it's I tell you, in the almost 30 years I've been in this industry, I've never seen rail rates more expensive than truck. Right? It was one of those things where one of the business models always that has been is if your customer's looking to reduce costs, but they can add a day or two transit, put them on rail. I mean, I remember, so we set up with a very, very, very large quartz company. They were doing stock transfers. DJ, I'm sure you've heard this story because we've had enough conversations about it, where it was like $17,000-$18,000 for a B train to go across Canada. Huge money. And they were doing stock transfers once a week, and it was 110,000 pounds. And so what I did is I went to CNCP, I created an SOP, I created a safety and compliance guide, and I presented it to them to move 55,000 pounds on a rail container. And at that point, it was like $3,700 per rail container. Right. So for the 18 grand, we could ship 5 containers across Canada at $55,000, 55,000 pounds a piece. So, I mean, the cost savings was astronomical. So we started going to 2 rail containers a week at a total of 7,000 instead of 18,000. You start putting $11,000 to your bottom line every week for 52 weeks a year. It's a huge amount of savings. And this was one of the conversations I've had with salespeople over and over and over again is, it's not about dropping rates. It's finding a better way to do things that they're doing and the customer being open to doing it.
Right.
And Dean, when you brought this up to me about today's show, I was like, holy crap. That is that's crazy. So
that's crazy. It is crazy for somebody new to the game. 5 years in, I remember nonstop hearing customers. Oh, we're going to rail. Oh, we're switching to rail. Oh, we're trying to save money. We're switching to rail. Oh, we're going. I mean, it's nonstop. To hear that is insane.
Yeah, there's a lot of incentives too to do so.
Yeah.
There's a sweet spot though. Dan, we talked about on the show before, we always see a strong correlation between imports from Asia into Los Angeles and then high volumes of intermodal moves between Los Angeles and Chicago, where most of the Class 1s hub and then distribute the freight all across the country. Because it's a landlocked port and they have real space issues there at the moment. But what happened last year is the volume flowed over to truckload because the intermodal networks was just swamped, literally with too much volume. It's not the case at the moment, even though they've got lots of containers on the ground and their dwell times are high because the chassis turn times are slow and they're pulling containers off chassis trailers, putting them on the ground just to get an empty chassis trailer to go and pick up a box. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy things happening. But the volumes are back to increasing in truckload because when those volumes surge, they flow over to the spot market. Last year was because of tight capacity. This year, it's the reverse. It's because spot rates have dropped so much in truckload. It's now, for spot market intermodal shippers, trucking is a better alternative on a lot of lanes. And the data point that you can all, if you subscribe to the Journal of Commerce, Ari Ash puts out his Intermodal Savings Index every month. And I'll quote you some of the stats that came out because it got my attention because I'm seeing it in truckload volumes. We're seeing spot market truckload volumes increase on intermodal lanes, not because the intermodal can't handle it. It's because truck is a cheaper and quicker alternative. which is really, really quite a unique situation. And the headline kind of story was that US intermodal customers are shipping cargo on the spot market. They're bypassing rail in favor of long-haul trucking because their savings have diminished. So what that means is that this index that measures 115 lanes of truckload and intermodal moves indicates that the average shipper saved 10% nationally in May by shipping on rail, but that's down from 30%. So their savings margin is decreasing. And whenever you get to only saving 10% by using intermodal, trucking becomes more attractive because the premium over rail is only a couple of $100, and trucks provide a faster and more reliable service than trains. Yeah. So what we're seeing is on those lanes in particular, like Chicago, Los Angeles to Chicago, up 13% month over month.
13% month over month?
Yeah, just starting to increase now. Rates are trending up, averaging $1.80 a mile. It's only 16 cents a mile higher than the May average, but it's going up. Bethlehem, PA into Dallas, 108 a mile on truck. That's excluding fuel. That's 60 cents a mile lower than this time last year. So you can see why that would be pretty competitive.
108
for shippers. Yeah, 108. Yeah. On a high volume middle modal lane, Los Angeles to Dallas, right? Loads moved on truck are up 23% in the last month. Spot rates are at $1.82, which is $1.27 a mile lower than this time last year. Another big lane out of Chicago is New Orleans. Line haul rates have dropped 66 cents a mile in the last year to an average of $1.97 this week. So when you look at a lot of our lanes where spot market volumes are going up, you're seeing very loose capacity where that premium that rail shippers have, where they normally enjoy a big savings on rail, even though it takes longer, is now coming down, and they're seeing volumes switch over. Now, this is spot market volumes. On the contract side, rail is still offering a better advantage over truckload, especially in that 800-mile range. And it's a great story. Ari put it out late last week. If you're not subscribing to Journal of Commerce, it's a really good indicator. And I'll pose this question to Jeff because in our network, we see about 40 billion in contract shipper freight rate and volume. And of that, about 10% moves on intermodal. But I have spoken to shippers last year who move as much as 50% of their freight on intermodal. But it really depends on the price of line haul spot rates and how much lower they are than intermodal. That determines when they make that move. So, Jeff, what is your sense of how much volume shippers move?
You know, that I don't have the numbers, to be perfectly honest with you. But what I did was I ran a few lanes and I did a comparison between rail and truck prior to this. And coming out of Edison to Chicago, 2-day lane for intermodal, if you're going to do that, $869 intermodal. Right. On the truckload side, $1,691, or a savings of 48.61%. Right, going in there. Another one, Edison to Ontario, California, 14-day.
So hold on, 14-day transit on rail?
Well, this is the cheapest rate intermodal. If you have the time as a shipper and you can afford that supply chain to go a little bit further than your normal transit time of 5 days, right? $1,526. Going over the road as a medium, $43.47. So 65% cheaper. Okay.
So do you have the rates on a 5-day, a normal transit, a 5-day normal transit?
Yeah, sure. I could get that for you.
Did you say Edison, New Jersey, Jeff?
Yeah, Edison, New Jersey.
To Ontario. I've got that at Van at line haul spot, 85 cents a mile today. That's way down. I mean, that's a pretty cheap lane and truckload. Anything heading west out of New Jersey is always going to be pretty cheap. Jeff's dropped out. He's back again. So it's a cheap lane for truckload. So are you saying that it's cheaper to go on truckload on that lane now?
No. To go intermodal coming out of Edison?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But there's another one here. I did Houston to Chicago. Okay, very close. Rail 23.95, and then on the van side, medium 27, 13, or 11%. Savings. To your point, Dean, where you said about 10%. Now, here's the thing: when you take into consideration chassis problems that everybody knows, the congestion that they're facing. But there's some incentives on that too. There's some government incentives on carbon footprint reduction on the green side of it, where if you happen to meet a certain criteria, you get those government incentives against your savings, but you got to prove it as a company, how much that you shift from over the road to rail. The other thing too is that per mile, you can run a ton of freight, 450 miles on one single gallon of gas intermodally. CSX has just put something out where they're stating that they can move 492 miles on a single gallon of gas. So when you think about conserving on fuel and all of that, and if you're a shipper, depending upon how many inventory turns that you have, can you afford that extra time on the rail?
Right.
You have the door-to-door option, where you have the full rail option, where you have the dray on the in-gate, the rail portion, and then the dray on the out-gate. Now you've got to coordinate that. There's a lot of moving things there on the intermodal side compared to the truckload side. So, what works for you, what works best for the customer, but you need to tell them that, for them to make that decision, whether or not they can hold inventory out there for many days.
And you're going to run
not only that.
Sorry,
go on, Dean.
No, I just said there's a lot of accessorial charges that could easily get added on the intermodal side.
Yeah.
Especially if
dwell time, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That could eat away.
And then there's also the, getting stuck at transfer yards and stuff as well, and things happening on that nature. It's always one of those things for shippers anyways that I've ever dealt with or worked with. It's one of those things where we're expecting it this day, but you got to have some leeway on each side in order to make it happen. Because if you're not ready to receive it and it arrives, now you're into demurrage and detention in the rail yard. If you don't outgate within 24 hours, 48 hours in some cases, and you get another thing, and
But Dan,
it's complicated.
It's the reason I thought it was a good subject for our sales audience today is that, I've always been an advocate of reading and studying what your customers' industry is doing, right? So in the trucking business, I always studied what demand was like for the freight I was hauling. So that tells me something about, the market. I wouldn't read trade media necessarily about, fleet equipment and the latest engine and all that stuff. That was kind of bedtime reading. But the stuff I would really focus on is what my competition's doing in particular. And in DAT's world, one of our big competitors is intermodal. So anything, when you get over 800 miles, intermodal and truckload really compete aggressively. Truckload's got a fairly strong advantage on short haul. I think the intermodal would like to play in that 300 to 400 mile space, but the transit time of trucks is so good in that area, it's hard for them to compete unless you've got a longer lead time. So the reason that I'm doing it is I like to watch what intermodal / competition's doing. And I think for those that are in the sales business, having other options to talk to shippers about, understanding the intermodal business. Now, remember, Spot is not a big part of the rail business. So Class 1 railroads don't sell direct to customers. They sell through IMCs, who I think there's 12 of them, if I'm right, Jeff. I think there's 12 IMCs, and they sell to customers. But a lot of that freight, most of the freight is contracted, and it's not like they've got hundreds of rail cars sitting around empty. They can just magically pull into a 2-mile train to run to Chicago. It doesn't work like that. It takes a lot longer. But there is capacity for people to put spot market volumes on a train, and that's where the IMCs come in. And when we talked to one of our other customers the other day, which was the folks at Nickel Logistics, John Christek, the COO, they confirmed that prior to the drop in truckload rates, shippers had an intermodal savings of between 10 and 20. But he said now that rates are pretty equal in both modes, it's favouring over-the-road trucking right now. So there's substantial savings for those folks. So it just gives you another option, right? If you're looking to
absolutely
wrap up a customer with a deal, truckload might not be the only thing you should be talking about.
No.
Almost like a seamless integrated switch where if it makes it better to run on rail, run on rail. If it doesn't, it makes it better to run OTR. You look at what Jeff just talked about the in-gate, about the out-gate, chassis being available, all those moving parts on rail. That's a tough gig at 300 miles.
Right.
A very tough gig, right? Because if you look at it, truck goes in, loads, it's gone. Well, I mean, just looking at, listen, will they probably make it happen? Sure. But will it be more of I can do a 3-day transit on that 300 mile or a 2-day transit as opposed to next day transit? You just look at it and you say, okay, truck loads, it goes, right? Rail container loads, it gets to the yard, it has to get put on a train. All other containers have to be put on a train because the train's not just going to run for 1 or 2 containers on that line. They're going to put multiple containers. So your truck might already have a 9 or 10 hour head start on that train, right?
Definitely.
Then it arrives, unloads, chassis in, out gate. And we all know if you've ever done anything in the dray world, whether it be ocean or rail, we all know it. You don't just pull in, hey, I'm here. Oh, okay, we've been waiting for you. Come on over and grab this container. Let's go.
Right over here.
Yeah. Man, I was thinking all morning, when are you going to show up? You know what I mean? It doesn't happen. So
doesn't happen.
That speed and efficiency, and especially, the reality is now you look at all of the different satellite systems that pretty much every company's got a direct feed where a customer can log in, enter their trailer number, and they can see their truck going down the road, right? It's almost as if every truck has a little Waze app that shows you how long their ETA and everything, which is great from a visibility perspective. Rail is not really there. I know all the rail I did with the different rail lines and going onto their websites, and it's like, last update was 2 days ago. It's like, when is it getting in-gated? It's very minimal on the visibility, which, you can imagine, right? How many containers does a rail, does like one train usually have? Some of them, I've sat there for 20 minutes watching container after container go by. Yeah. And it's like, really? and to Jeff's point, if you're pulling all of that for like 8 miles a gallon or whatever it was, that's pretty damn good fuel efficiency. Yeah. But can they really build more rail lines as fast as they can build more roads?
Well, the other point is that I think for some of us in the non-asset world, the trains are a viable source of capacity. So typically when capacity is tight in truckload, a lot of truckload carriers will put their trailers on a flat car. So trailer on flat car, TOFC, is a viable option. And you look at a lot of intermodal trains today, and you will see a lot of trailer on flat car. You'll see large truckload carriers, a lot of UPS 28-foot pups, a lot of 53s mixed in with a lot of truck. The problem is that it's a declining segment for the railroads because it's a really unprofitable segment. Because when you think about a double stack well car with 253s, you can put a lot more freight on a rail wagon with 253s double stack than just one, 53 and a pup. So they're not buying flat rail cars for trailer on flat car. That's a declining segment. I just pulled the latest data from the American Association of Railroads, the AAR, for week 24 ending June 18. Trailer on flat car is down 24% year over year. At about 15,900 moves. It's down about 5,000 moves per week in probably 2 years. Containers are down about 3%. So I watch very carefully what intermodal's doing in terms of what's moving and what's not, because some of that chemical volumes, as we've talked about, it's up 2.5%. Why would you watch chemical tank carloads? Chemicals are used in almost every manufacturing process in the country. It's a really good read on manufacturing demand. And we had Jason Miller on our show yesterday talking about industrial production and manufacturing and how good things are looking. So, another data point is chemicals. That kind of confirms that those volumes are going into manufacturing facilities more so than
to Dan's point about the visibility and everything. Now, I'll date myself, but I was the Northeast regional operations manager for Snyder Intermodal. Mm-hmm. And at that time, Snyder implemented trailer tracks as well as tracks on their chassis. They were like one of the first ones that did that at that time. So we did have the visibility, and we could tap into the systems and be able to see where our containers were, whether TOFCs or COFCs, anywhere at that time. And that was back in 05. But things have evolved much more, and the intermodal has become more efficient, yet they still do have their issues. There's no doubt about it with congestion. They also have issues where trains won't move unless they meet a certain percentage as far as capacity on that train. And Global One in Chicago, I mean, there were times where trains sat for a week, did not move because they did not meet that capacity, and they're not going to roll that train unless they have that there. And UPS at the time, especially around peak season, they owned the trains, man. 90% of them were those pups and TOFCs, and it was very difficult. But the other thing too is that rails, just like OTR, they have HOS rules and regulations as well. And if their couplers happen to get frozen, let's say in Butte, Montana, during the winter time, they stop.
It's beautiful in Butte in the winter, isn't it?
Hey, you know what? I say that because at one time I literally stopped the train and took a container off the train and put it on an OTR chassis to get it into St. Louis to the Ford Motor Company, because you know what happens when a line goes down, right? So, there's so many different things that happen on the rail just as much as over the road, that you have to take everything into consideration. And look, I'm an advocate of rail, hence the name of my company, Railgistics, because I love the rail. I did it for a long time, moved a tremendous amount of stuff over the rail, and it is efficient. It was a lot cheaper, and it really depends on the lanes that you're moving. You'll lose in some, you'll gain in others, but it is a good option by far.
Well, I like the fact that you guys at Schneider superseded the rail line visibility by putting trackers on your own trains. That was, that right there goes back to what we talk about, where you're raising the bar, right? I remember we actually, when I was working with Dell Computer and we were moving tons of computers, the question was, how do we track this freight? Like, we never had trailer tracking, and Qualcomm at that point, trailer tracking was so expensive. So I actually went to, and I don't know if you guys ever heard of them, but it was mobile GPS units that you used to be able to put into your car. So you used to be able to tuck the mobile GPS under your car, and if it got stolen, you can log on and track your car. So what we did is we went out and we bought 1,500 of these GPS units, and we shipped them down to the shipper, and they said, put one in every load. And then when at the receiver, it would sometimes they would get lost. Most of the time they would get lost. Sometimes they would say, okay, here's the unit. And normally it would just go in the trash. But that was the way we upped our game outside the spectrum of what was available in the market. And, that it reminds me of what Data Day is all about. Is here's the data. How are you going to think outside the box to help your customers succeed?
Exactly.
And help things get better. And, we actually won the business because of that idea. And I still remember vividly going, oh my God, what if we put these car trackers? Because I had a car stolen, and then I started researching, and I'm saying, well, if I put this tracker in, then this would be pretty cool. And that's back in the days with dial up and where it was like, Yahoo, Internet Explorer, or whatever. And you're one finger, you type everything in, and you hit enter, and you come back like an hour later, and you got some results, right? And it was it was crazy, but it was one of those things where I stopped and I went, is anyone really gonna is this really gonna work? And then watching it all unfold, and then I still vividly remember the first day one of those trackers was in the truck, and I'm like, oh my God, I could actually see the truck going down the road. And then we contacted Cargo Cats, the Miami cargo theft unit. We told them what we were doing. We did, and everybody was like, oh my God, are you serious? And it was like this big, we were the only one in that network doing that for this company. Nice. And it got us a ton of business, like a ton of it. Was it expensive? Sure. I mean, we bought 1,500
Absolutely.
tractors at $100 a piece, right? Like it was a lot of money, but
And
the revenue we made and the ability the securement of the client was tenfold better than what we spent, right?
Yeah. And Dan, you know, going to your point, that was big time in pharma. You know, when you're shipping, you know, a 48 by 48 that's maybe 18 inches, that's got $300,000 worth of product on it with black wrap around it because they didn't want anybody to know about it. Used to put the trailer track or the shipment tracker in the middle of it, and the same with Temptel with the produce, you know, on the reefer to make sure that when they're doing the pulp test and all of that, the temp is equally distributed throughout the whole thing, you know, and we had to monitor that too. So absolutely.
You're talking about Rhine meters inside the actual skids?
Absolutely, because you had to see what the core of the shipment looked like compared to the top to the bottom, whether it was placed in the middle of the container or at the nose or at the tail, and you were able to decipher what that temp was, you know. But yeah, we used to do that too, way back in the day on the trailer tracks and the shipment tractors, especially on high volume, because I moved a lot of stuff for Panasonic with their laptops, you know, $1 million loads, $2 million loads. You know, we always had to know where they were, geofencing and all that kind of stuff. So big time.
Well, you know, Jeff, you brought up a very valid point, and I think it goes back. I mean, listen, I don't think we have to share with the audience how important data days are, how important data is. Dean has been a big proponent of data is the new oil, and it really is, and it's more valuable than oil at this time. I would say it's the new platinum. And here's the reason being is, you know, data is the number one thing companies rely on to make decisions. So you talk about the Rhine meters, you talk about smart reefers, you talk about all of this. All of it is doing is making data more accessible and cleaning up the data to give you a good data set to make a decision on. So you look at, you know, whether it be coming into a facility and it goes into quarantine till it passes inspection. Okay. What is inspection? So before the data, they used to have to take samples of everything, put it through and make sure samples of the bottom of the skid, the middle of the skid, the outside of the skid, nothing froze and all that. Now they can take a Rhine meter, download the data. They can just take the smart reefer, download the data. They have the discharge, they have the intake, they have all that. They put it all together and they say, okay, it's good to go. So quarantine times have decreased, right? Data tells you how to prepare for things. So data on OTR. If you have trailer tracking, you're looking at it and it's literally saying right now, it's to the point where if it's on OTR, 37 minutes ETA. Okay, you're going into the motor companies or you're going into somewhere that needs that product right away. Okay, guys, 37 minutes till it arrives. Let's SWAT team this and get it in. Like that is what we bring to the market every week with Data Day Wednesday. And now with the lane of the day, and if you follow the data story, you're always going to be on top. Always. And I know I didn't have to plug it like that, guys, but the reality is I think it's important that we share with the audience because data can get lost, right? It can be one of those, hey guys, great conversation today. Thanks. What did you do with the information? Right? Because every week, Dean brings a massive data set to the table. Most people pay $30,000 for.
Yeah.
Right? Like let's call a spade a spade. The stuff that Dean uses is very expensive and it's accurate as hell, and it can help you win a ton of business.
Right.
So I'm saying this to reiterate to the audience, it is so important what we're talking about here. So if you have questions, ask them now. Get them answered. Like, you know, your intermodal versus, so what creates, and Dean, I'll ask a question to you, you know, what creates that switch in intermodal over OTR? Is it because the spot market is dropping so rapidly? Is it because intermodal is delayed? Like, what do you see as some of the main points shippers are making that move?
Right. And you know something too, you have to look at sustainability, okay, on the contracts versus the spot market. How long is the spot market going to be viable for as a viable option for your customer? Short term, right? Because we all know what's going to happen in the spot market, right? It's eventually going to go up. Right. And now they were on the contracted side. So they kind of blew off their carriers, their incumbent carriers and everything, and said, listen, I'm saving $2,000 per load by going to the spot market now. And then all of a sudden things start rising. They go back to their incumbent carrier and he goes, listen, we need to discuss. Hey, you dropped me like a dime, man. It's like you gotta really,
Jeff,
you gotta really think about this.
I agree 1,000%, brother. I agree with you hands down. But Dean has shared many times, carriers are like goldfish, right? So shippers drop carriers all the time.
And yeah, I know.
Why is it as soon as they're ready, carriers are like, all right, I'll do the business again. Like we do all of this to ourselves in this industry. I'm sorry, brother. If you remember 2018 to 19, everyone was complaining. Oh my God, how can the rates drop so much? And my first question was, do you take the loads? Yes. Okay, you're taking the loads. You're telling the shipper you could do, but if I don't take it, somebody else will. I said, I agree. I understand.
Right.
But collectively, we do it to ourselves all the time. I talk all the time about Toronto, Montreal, $11, $12, $13, $14, $1,500, $900 lane. 2019, I had people offering $350. And the problem is somebody that does not understand their overall cost, or somebody of the mindset that says, I'm just going to pay for fuel right now, will take that. Right. Unfortunately, I've seen it so many times. Shippers are like, well, the going rate's $350. Why would you say that's the going rate? I paid that last week for one of my loads. How many loads do you do a week? 15. What did you pay for the other 14 loads? Well, not 350, but one did it for 350. So how do you determine that's the median that everyone has to go by? Like, that's freaking crazy, but it's what it is. And again, I've been part of both the solution and the problem.
Oh yeah.
So I could speak on this because I was on the asset side just as you were.
Yes.
We were part of the problem.
But what's more important to you, right? Building long-term business relationships with the carriers and looking towards peak season. I remember the thing was they were saying carriers came back and they pretty much say, hey, what have you done for me lately? You didn't feed me throughout the whole year, but now you need me and you want me to come to the plate and bat, a home run out of the park for you. Come on, you dropped me like a dime. I think you have to look at not just cost, but you also have to look at long-term business relationships, and making sure that you have the capacity there when you need it, especially when you run multi-million dollar operation and you need these carriers. You just can't drop them. So I've been on that side, and the carriers that I work with can attest that if I signed that contract, right, and I did business with them, they knew they were in there for the long run. I'm not going. However, I dumped the carriers when they gave me this outrageous rate, and then 6 months later down the road, they came back to me and they said, "Hey Jeff, listen, you know what? We looked at our OR and it's 114. We can't do this. I'm going to have to take a 7% increase." Well, why? What the? Come on. You should know the business. If you've been in the business a long time, give me a little higher rate. That's kind of even across the whole board. That covers on the low, on the high, and that you make money, we make money. We're all happy. You got to look at it that way. That's the way I look at it anyway.
And I think that answers your question, Dan, right? Which is, it's about service. So why would someone flip to intermodal? Why would you flip from intermodal to truckload? Well, it's about service levels, right? Your best Z train out of Los Angeles to Chicago was like a 55-hour service. Well, a team's going to be there in 36 hours on a truck, right? With no delays, no ramps, no chassis trailers, no lift on, lift off, no in-gate, out-gate, all that stuff.
Yep.
So it's I think it's largely driven by price. Like, so when spot rates are low like this, truckload spot becomes attractive, but it's also a trade-off on the service side. It depends on the commodity too. Can your commodity stand being transloaded and handled multiple times? And does it have a long lead time? Is it just for inventory replenishment, or is it just in time? So I think there's all those other factors that come into it. But I would say that, to Jeff's point, service is probably the biggest thing, because jumping into the spot market for an intermodal move to save some money is probably not your best long-term move if you're a big shipper. So, but maybe a smaller opportunistic shipper would sort of entertain.
I remember vividly when we had when I was at the asset side, and we had the Dell and Microsoft account in Tennessee. Microsoft was out of Memphis, Dell was out of Nashville and Austin, Texas. And it was funny because we believed, like, our corporate motto was the client comes first. But it was interesting. Clients to get us there were a means to get us where we wanted to go to service our large clients. And what I actually found over the years, and it was only after I started really thinking about it, it was like Viva Magnetics was one of our major customers in Markham, Ontario. And Viva made the DVD and CD cases for like video games and DVDs, CDs, all that kind of stuff. Very light loads. I mean, it was a point where we were doing almost 85, 90 cents a mile. Like just annihilating any carrier because we had $8 or $9 a mile coming home. And again, so we look at this specific scenario, right? For us, at that point in time in our business, it was, we need to serve this customer. So we will do whatever we need to do. We will just literally pay for fuel or even half a fuel to get down there. So we have no issues servicing the high volumes of that customer. But then the question became, and I only thought about it after years later, we totally ruined the market for that outbound because there's no way other carriers can compete at 80 cents a mile. No way. So and I ask you guys, the question becomes, did we ruin it for everyone else, right? Because we actually distorted the market. So the customer's like, you're charging $1.10 a mile, we pay 85 cents a mile. And another carrier that doesn't have $9 a mile coming home is like, how in the hell did
how are they doing that?
Right, exactly. And it's crazy because, yes, Dean, definitely we'll give you that. I want you to share that. But it was like, okay, right? Like, we were protecting one of our really big clients on the back end, and the customer on the front end was kind of just a feed to get us there. But, you know, you look at the other perspective, this company destroyed outbound rates for that company because we were able to operate at that low margin, where at that point, I think like $1.40 a mile was the average rate per mile outbound. Right. So we're 50, 60 cents lower per mile.
Almost cutting it in half.
Right.
Yeah. Right. But we still made major money. But $9 a mile coming home. Right. So, but again, any broker that would have had freight to that area, we would have ran it for them at 85 cents a mile. So they would have been the king going to that area. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of scenario where we talk about. I've told you guys about Hertz, and, you know, a guy at the company I was working at knew all the players. For months, we had like a 9-10 inch stack of quotes we gave them. We never won a single piece of business. This guy, the first week he did business with them, he started moving like 15, 20 loads a week because he knew the people he was working with, right? Dean, go share your story.
It was just, it's an interesting data point because a lot of you will be reading some of the media that talks about this, the capacity shift, right? So where this trend, what started in the pandemic for leased on owner operators and company drivers going out and buying a new truck and becoming independent contractors. So owner operators, independent contractors, their own authority, their own truck and trailer in their own business. And the narrative now has switched back to, well, you know, because diesel's high and spot rates are low, owner operators are immediately going to switch back to being leased on to a large company like Jeff's old company, Schneider. Well, I've never bought into that narrative for the simple reason, if diesel's 90 cents a mile, why am I going to go back and haul freight for $2 a mile for Schneider or Werner when diesel's 88 cents a mile or 90 cents a mile? Like the math does not add up, because when you're leased on, the average at the end of 2021 was $1.78 a mile. They're probably going to have to pay you at least another 10 to 15 cents a mile now to accommodate newer costs. Diesel's still going to be a big chunk of that. So I just don't buy into the logic that carriers are going to automatically switch back. Now, capacity is bleeding off out of the industry. We're already seeing that. But it's not what you think. It's not carriers are suddenly saying, oh, I'll park my trailer, hand back my authority, have it revoked, and I'll go and be power only for a large fleet. No, that is not the only thing that's happening. It's a really nuanced subject. And the story is, there's a bunch of guys that are in the same big parking lot where I park my truck here in New England. We have we pay a couple $100 a month, security cameras, all that stuff. 8 of them were owner operators for a large e-commerce company. Started in January last year. Of the 8, And of course, they made a lot of money last year towing trailers for this big company because there was so much demand for power-only moves, moving loads between warehouse. Of the 8, 4 have already sold and are now driving a local pickup and delivery van for 85 grand a year, but sold their trucks. Now, they will be in the employment numbers that everybody's talking about. Wow. Everybody's saying, oh, there's a lot of truck transportation numbers, therefore owner-operators must be moving back to being leased on. No, that's not what's happening. The capacity is going from a large Class 8 truck to a small C&D. So of the other 4, 2 have got their trucks in the shop and can't pay the repair bill, and the other 2 are going to get out of the business soon, because on that company's load board last Friday, long-haul moves between warehouses were $1.75 a mile all in. So this is the group of carriers that hemorrhaged in 2019. We had a lot of guys come in, power only, a lot of e-commerce, freight, warehouse to warehouse spots. They're the same guys that are going to go out of business this year. In the same yard, right? There's a guy that owns 3 trucks, 2 reefers and a flatbed, owns them outright, doesn't owe a bank anything. He said, I'm going to park my 2 reefers and the drivers can go and work for someone else. I'm going to run my flatbed because the rates are so good, right? And the third guy is my really good friend. He bought an old Maverick truck and he's doing exceptionally well. He used DAT's load board, has a little bit of contract freight on one direction, spot on the back haul, and he's averaging about $4 a mile. And he's looking to add trucks. So there's a group of, so that it's very nuanced. It's not everybody doesn't just follow the same trend. There are some that will exit. There are some that will stay, especially the guys that have seen one or more market cycles.
Yes.
So now, because if you're the owner operator that has your own truck that's 7 or 8 years old and you've paid everything off, you are not in any trouble, right? Because you're running around break even at $1.97 line haul this week. You can pay yourself a little bit lower wage and still get by because spot rates are still about 30 cents a mile higher than pre-pandemic years, right? And then there's other group of guys who have found a niche and are servicing the heck out of it with contract freight. They've picked up a customer and they can run a couple of thousand miles a week at $4 a mile. Darby, my good friend, leaves Tuesday morning. He's home Friday night, home every weekend, right? And bangs out a lot of miles, makes a lot of money. And he's a guy that started 18 months ago in the industry. Wow. So I think it's a small data sample. But I've been saying, and we've said the same thing on the show before, this is what's happening in the market. So this idea that there's a bloodbath and carriers are going to leave the industry in great numbers, it's much more nuanced than that. But it's a typical market cycle where rates drop, capacity bleeds off, the market will pick back up a little bit later in the year. We think maybe later in this year, early next year, and then we'll be back off to the races again. And shippers will be looking for capacity, and they'll be looking to all of us in the the brokerage world, logistics world, for solutions.
That's right.
And I also think one thing that we've talked about since day one for over a year now, collectively, is having that consistent conversation with your customer and saying, how can I help you achieve your goals? Like, it all goes back to that, like it's one of these things where if we're not consistently checking in, it's not that we don't. And here's the thing. Everyone watching this show is a high performer, else they wouldn't spend their time trying to get data and everything and be better, do more, and achieve more. However, having that desire to be a high performer and actually implementing and going above and beyond every day is 2 completely different things. And when we look at it, we say, okay, Dan, my customers, I lost some business to my customer. I ask why. Well, I'm not real sure. And my first question back to a salesperson when they ask that is, well, how are you not sure? Like, nobody leaves a coach, a service provider, if they're helping them achieve their goals. Nobody. Like, you look at it from a personal trainer perspective, right? Like, just something as simple as the gym. You hire a personal trainer and you start seeing results. You're not going to fire them until you achieve the results. And then maybe you go on a maintenance where you see them every, half the amount of time. But if something happens, what do? You go back to them, right? They're the guide to help you get to where you want to go.
Right.
And if you're losing customers to spot market, to different shifts, is because you're not in the mix as much as you need to be.
Right.
It
not
really is
asking
what
the
it
right
comes
questions.
down to. Yeah.
You're not asking
and you're
the right
not
questions.
delivering on stuff like what we just talked about. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how many people I've said to, take the link of the show, send it to your customer and say, what do you think of this? You know, when you have an hour tonight or something, look at it and I'd love to talk to you about it. Because this show alone, your customer will look at it and go, yeah, we were playing with intermodal, we weren't sure. And it's like, okay, you know what? Maybe I can get you some intermodal rates, or maybe we could talk about when that shift needs to happen. And you, as the intermediary, the third party involved, can say, okay, we're getting up to that shift. Hey, by the way, FYI, next week we're going to shift all your freight over to rail. We're going to play the market and help you achieve that goal of zero increased cost of shipping in 2022, whatever the case is. But it's that application of this information. You know, Jeff shared some numbers. Dean shared some numbers. We're looking at that capacity. You know, like I'm telling you, there's experts out there that can help you with all of this. And it's a matter of applying the information. And I know that there was a little off topic, guys, but I think it's really important because
It is.
we bring, in my opinion, and maybe I'm biased because I love this show. I think we bring the best information to the market weekly. I really think we do because, you know, Dean, what you just said right there is it's not a bloodbath that other people are reporting. Guys, it's not. It's not. There are people still doing better than they've ever done in this industry.
Yep.
All the time. And still carriers making a ton of money in this industry. Broker, like everyone serving people at the highest levels. Like, you know, it came to a point where when I realized that some information you read really needs to be quantified, I started trying to find 3, 4, 5 articles on the same topic. And if you read all of them, and I'll give you a perfect example. So remember when all these like gigantic awards were happening and carriers were being like fined millions of dollars for accidents and all this kind of stuff. I started going and reading, and there was one company that had an accident out in Iowa somewhere, I think. And I found 4 different articles about it. And one was from the company, that driver that hit the car. One was from another company that had a driver coming this way, like, because it was like 3 or 4 companies involved. And you start reading all the stories and it pieces the actual story together, the reality of what it is together. And that's what data is. You know, a data set point from Dean, you're going to look at that data set point. Then we're going to have another data set point next week, and that's going to tell a little bit more of the story. And then the next week's going to tell a little bit more. And then by week 3 or 4 or 2, you have the complete story on that data set. And that's why we started Lane of the Day, because those little tiny data sets will help keep you in the mix of the overall picture.
Connect the dots. Yeah, you're just trying to connect the dots. That's all you're trying to do.
I could put a bow on this with a great quote from a movie. You've seen iRobot.
Oh yeah.
You'll remember Detective Will Spooner, aka what's his real name?
Will Smith.
Will Smith is asking Professor Lanning the questions, and Professor Lanning says, "You're not asking the right questions." And when he gets it, he says, "That detective is the right question." And I always think about, because it's sometimes when you go in to talk to customers. I used to do risk surveys for Allianz in Australia. We go in and do a risk survey of a truck fleet to figure out whether we should insure it or not. And I used to say to my underwriters, it's not about the questions you ask, it's about the questions you don't ask. Because, you know, observation is very, very important. Sometimes no data is good data. And you've got to look at things with a very different lens. But asking the right questions is very important. Also being an incredibly good listener. But you've actually got to do some homework on what questions to ask. I think that might be something that you cover a lot in your course, Dan, because that to me is more important about in terms of how you handle your customer negotiation is what questions to ask, because sometimes the customer doesn't know what needs to be asked. You've actually got to coach them in that direction.
Yeah.
There's another great saying too, and you probably heard it: when someone's data rich and information poor.
Yes.
So, you know, that's why salespeople fail and lose customers, because of non-engagement. They're not engaging with their customers as much as they should by asking those critical questions. Hey, how am I doing? How can I be better? Where am I failing? Don't be afraid to say, where am I failing? Because that means that you're asking the right questions. You want a true partnership. If you're not doing what they want you to do, ask that question. They'll be more than happy. If they are a true partner, they will answer that question honestly. And that's what you need to be successful, to move that relationship further out.
Did you see how Jeff prefaced that? If they are a true customer, if they are your ideal customer, when you say ask the right questions, it brings me to something immediately. So anyone who's watching, listening, whether it be now or on the replay, and obviously if it's 6 months from now, check the data before you do this. Send this show to your customer and say, did you realize spot market on truck might be cheaper than your rail that you're using right now? Do you want me to explore it?
Great question. Exactly.
And here's the thing is, if you've never talked rail with your customer, you have no idea if they're doing rail, right? But if they're doing rail, we've just given you the data to tell you it's cheaper by OTR.
Yeah, it could be possible.
So there could be an opportunity to get business as of the end of the day today with your customer that knows, likes, and trusts you. Because what did you do? Y'all got some different data sets and data points to talk to the customer about. Now, Gary says, good morning, Gary. I feel like it's been forever since you've seen
I know.
me.
Morning, Gary.
He must be talking about the three of you. He said distinguished panel. I don't know. I don't know about that. But all of us are like, what? That's hilarious. There it is. Long-term carrier relations, whether you're a broker or a shipper, we can't do it without them, but it does work both ways. Scott, you
Absolutely.
are so correct.
Agreed,
man.
Scott. Collaboration is key for this. But Dan, and you touched on something before we even went live, and it's the bringing the value. In the end, I think what you're going to see more, and I think we're starting to see it a little bit, just as a society in whole, but in this industry too, is more. It's focused on the value and not the price. Everybody was so price driven. We were just driving prices to the ground with the Walmarts and Amazons and everything. That I think it's like, okay, I think, inflation's already raising our prices. So now it's okay. We need value. What's the value? You got to bring value. So you have to bring value to the relationship's huge. But then, and like Jeff said, if you have that relationship and you know who you're working with and you guys are on the same vibe, and you should be able to tell that. Then you just have to bring the value. Find out what is hurting them. You have to think outside the box and just value.
But there's one thing today, and I'd love your guys' opinion on it. Value is key, but if you're so far out of the ballpark because you're trying to buy a Ferrari next week, no matter how much value you bring, you're never going to get an opportunity.
But that's just not your ideal client customer profile.
But I mean, even ideal client, DJ. So here's the thing, right? Is we look at it, we say, okay, our ideal client is XYZ. They believe in ABC, right? Whatever that is for you. And let's say you're trying to put 35, 40 points on a load, right? To the tune of $1,000, just hypothetically. And instead of saying, okay, so what I want to do is I want to leave a piece of the pie for somebody else, as Dean's talked about many, many times. I'm going to go in at $300 profit or $250 profit, and I'm going to do it over the long term. So you might want, because everybody, let's face it, everybody wants a client that's going to be with the long term, that values them as a resource, that like everybody, whether it be a spouse, a friend, any part of our life, we want to be valued, right? And we want to be seen as bringing something to the table. That's just human nature. That's what we want. We want to be appreciated. We want to be all of that. So that obviously is going to translate right into business. And you ask anybody what their ideal client profile is, it's going to be, somebody that, treats me right. And, all those kind of baseline things. But most of the time, price will get you in the door. Let's call a spade a spade.
True.
If they're not necessarily dying and having issues, it's a hard sell to say, well, yeah, I'm $350 higher than what you're paying now, but hey, the value I'm going to bring you for spending an extra $300,000 a year is insane, right? Now, if they're in this huge kerfuffle and everything's going wrong, then for sure that $300,000, if they're doing $700,000 in OS&D and claims, and you can bring $300,000 and eliminate the claim. That's a bonus, but that's value. That's in the sell, right? So it's also understanding that, especially in today's market, again, when we talk to shippers, when we talk on this show, Dean and Jeff, when we bring people to the table, DJ, visibility. I want transparency. It's why I still believe, hands down, 2022 is the year of cost plus.
Yeah.
Tell your customer what you're making, create a high and a low. You know, I'm working with a customer of mine right now where his customers are loving cost plus. Like, he's doubled, tripled his business because of it. And he's saying, you know, my minimum, so if you're doing LTL, my minimum is going to be this. The minimum profit I'm putting on is this. But the maximum I'm putting at this, and in between, I'm at 12% across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And so his customers going, okay, I love it. And just like instantly, they're like, okay, give the freight to him, give the freight to him, give the freight to him, because it's transparency.
We could forecast.
It's visibility at its finest.
But Dan, that's value. That's value. That's value.
But it really is.
Bringing that experience of bringing that transparency and exposure is value. That's value.
And it all stems from data.
It's not just raising the price or bringing more. It's what you do for them to make it easier is the value that I'm talking about. Value
and DJ, that's all data.
Well, yeah,
data.
Of course.
What do customers want? Hey, what do you want out of a shipper? What do you want? I want visibility. I want transparency. You want transparency? Here you go. I'll give you full transparency. And again, asking the right question. And so, Dean, the question is, how do we ask the right questions about data? Because you can ask the wrong question to a data set,
right,
and you'll get the wrong answers.
I'd start with the context, right? I rarely start with a particular data point. I like to tell a story first and then back into the data, right? Because without the context, the data is meaningless. And I learned a very hard lesson, in fact, at Schneider, Jeff, when Don Osterberg, who's VP of Safety, we did some predictive analytics when I was at Qualcomm. We did some modeling for them, and Don was he's actually turned out to be a really good mentor and friend. But he said, sitting there for an hour presentation, it was PowerPoint by Dev, and he says, he looked across the boardroom table and he said, "So what? Now what?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I get it. I love the analytics. That was fantastic. But what do I do with it?" So it was, so what, now what? It's if you can't figure out a way to use the data and represent and show how the data is used in the customer's terms, not just the data itself, how the data is applied in their world, in their speak, it'll be very hard to make that connection. So it's really about telling a story around the data in their world. That takes a lot of preparation to do that.
Yes. And data should never be an emotional thing. The data should speak for itself, and go to the data points and tell them why. This is actual data based on what you're currently doing. This is your information, and this is going to tell a story, and that's what the story should be based upon. There should not be any emotions involved in data sets or how you present the data. Period. End of discussion. We're talking about moving a business forward, and that data that you present is going to tell that story, and you need to tell them how that applies to their business. Period.
And remember, data analytics and data science isn't new anymore. It was in 2003 when we implemented the first predictive model at Dupre Logistics in Louisiana, predicting who's going to have a wreck, and we had to get all that data and analyze it. Most companies have got their own data scientists on staff these days. They've got some sort of business intelligence application people. They've got pretty good tech stack. You just can't come in with some clever Excel spreadsheets and pivot tables. You've actually got to be able to tell a story around how to use the data. That's where the value is created.
Yeah, because they'll call you out. They will call you out if you're telling them some BS. So you got to be on top of your game for sure.
Got to bring your best stats going. Yeah.
Yes. I love it.
Yeah. Awesome.
I love it. Well, we are
DJ
ending at the hour, so I will finish.
Yeah, look, we're friggin' bang on. We're bang on.
Look at that. I got 30 seconds to make this happen. So thank you guys for joining us, Jeff.
So nobody interrupt DJ.
As always. What's that?
DJ's only got 30 seconds. Nobody interrupt him.
Hurry up,
Go,
DJ.
D.
Hurry
Here
up.
we go.
30 seconds, real.
Hey,
Yeah, don't
did I
interrupt me
ever
right
tell
now.
you guys about that time? No, I'm just kidding.
No, seriously, thank you guys for making this show what it is, for joining us, all of your comments, being live with us daily, weekly. It's amazing. Jeff, Dean, thank you for joining us. Tomorrow we got a great show for you guys. Don't miss out. Again, Sales Chatter Live, 9 a.m., 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. Start your day right with us. Subscribe down below if you are watching this replay on either of our YouTube channels, Sales Chatter Live, Dan Deegan. You can find us on LinkedIn as well if you are watching it there. Again, thank you for this industry is amazing. We are not falling apart. We just have to come together. That's it. Quote to take us out. This was special quote sent all the way from good old Dean last night. Thank you for this. I am going to share this because this is great. This is from that young trucking guru. And it is, if you eat it, thank a trucker. Or thank a farmer. I'm sorry. If you eat it, thank a farmer. If you got it, thank a trucker. If you like everything you got, thank a veteran.
Yeah.
Especially your freedom.
Yep.
Amen.
Amen. Yep.
Centurion Trucking, our motto is people before profit. Today's market requires more transparency, consistency, and focus on what our clients need to win. Centurion Trucking and American Logistics are poised to help their clients achieve and surpass their targets. If you're looking for a team that honors your needs, dreams, and aspirations, then get a hold of Daman at American Logistics or Centurion Trucking and start designing